All right, Chapter 7, the Writing Center. Again, in most of my preschool classrooms, we did not have a writing center unless it was the pre-K classroom. And within the classrooms of all ages, we did have writing baskets. So I'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. If I can get them, there we go. So we're going to talk about writing as a natural development, emergent writing, like we talked about emergent reading, dealing with writing in the preschool classroom, setting up the writing center, identifying scribbling and mock writing, promoting letter awareness, cognitive development writing activities, physical development writing activities. We often don't think about how much physical development is involved in writing. Social development, language development, dual language learners, and what's your role? So, the Writing Center is new in many early childhood classrooms. And again, I didn't have a designated Writing Center in most of my younger classrooms, but I did for sure have one in my pre-K group. Learning to write is largely an act of discovery. It's something that it's again on that continuum from holding a pencil the right way to actually being able to write a sentence. It's very interesting. And again, if you're interested in this stuff, which I think is one of the most important things that we do as early childhood professionals, is helping children learn to communicate, read, and write. Take 217, because it really focuses on all of this stuff and goes into much more depth about how the whole process works, what are some things you can do, and how children understand what reading and writing are. Okay, so scribbling. Scribbling is often, depending on a child's age and development stage, it is a physical activity first, and then it becomes a way to communicate. So if you've ever taken a class with me, you've probably heard me talk about my daughter when she was 2, used to do fasties. And fasties was she would take a pen and a piece of paper and just scribble. And she called it fasties. And my interpretation of that was, oh, what are you doing? What are you trying to draw or write or whatever? That was, and she would say fasties. Fasties was not the result of what she put on the paper. Fasties was the act of doing it, right? She was not drawing or writing for a purpose. She was doing this because she liked the physical activity of it, right? So a lot of times when children are writing or drawing when they're younger, they're not doing it with the result in mind. They're doing it with this is what I'm doing right now, and I like to do this. Same thing when you see kids painting at an easel, especially under 3, really under 4, they're not doing a project that they have in mind, right? They are, I like to do this. I like to see the way the paint colors mush together. I like to see what happens to the paper. It's not about making something. It's about the act of doing. So fill your environment with words, print, and written down talk. What we're trying to do in preschool is help children understand the connection between the words that we say and the words on the page. And then we're teaching them what the individual words are. First you're talking about writing, and then you're going to talk about the words, and then you're going to talk about the individual letters and their sounds, right? Display children's writing, even scribbles and lines. As children get that connection that when I do this, when my teacher does this, she's writing down a message to someone else. And so I know how to do that. Then you see children who are scribbling things, and then they can say, this says I went to the farm yesterday, even though it, doesn't. Rich contextualized clues. There should be cues. You need to help children understand how writing, words, letters all go together. That print is symbolic, functional, and meaningful. And we see less and less people writing down notes today. So it's important to show that in the classroom. right? Because how do a lot of people now, if you need to remember something, you pick up your phone and say, remember to pick up the laundry. And there's no connection to words and writing, right? There's connection to speech, but not to words and writing. We need kids to see how that whole thing works. Have a child-sized desk. I don't know why you would have furniture in your classroom that's not child-sized. So provide writing, printing tools and sets of letters, a typewriter, a computer, a sand table, because sand table is a place where you can trace letters, right? Colorful posters or pictures with labels, a wall hanging that contains letters. In our writing centers, we had all kinds of different paper. We had all kinds of different writing utensils, feather pens, markers, bendy pencils, all kinds of things that they could do all kinds of stuff with. Stamps with letters, stamps with words, magnet words, all of that kind of stuff. Anything that has to do with letters and words, put it in your writing center. Also, a super fun thing that we did when my kids were 3s was we had writing centers with envelopes and labels so they could send letters home. They just went crazy with this, right? I was spending so much money on stamps to send these kids, scribbles home. But the idea that they could write something down, stick it in an envelope, and then it would show up at their house was like, what? This is a miracle. Doing that is a really good writing activity. Random scribbling, controlled scribbling, named scribbling, and mock letters. This is what we're talking about. Fastie's random scribbling, controlled scribbling. This girl's doing controlled scribbling. You can see that because she goes from one end of the paper to the other. She's changing colors. She has a specific line that she's following, right? That's controlled scribbling. Named scribbling. I don't think this girl, after she showed you that picture, if you said, oh, what did you do? That she would say that scribbling corresponds to any idea or message. When you have a child who jots something down and says, this paper says I need to go to the dentist tomorrow, that is named scribbling. And then mock letters is when you see individual little shapes that are kind of like letters, but not exactly. They're on that continuum, moving from just, making marks on paper to putting down things that look like letters. They're on their way to being writers. Obviously, names are one of the first things that children learn to write. And they learn the first letter of their name usually first, right? And they learn other people in their family's names and what letters are in that. And that's because you talk about it. That's because their parents talk about it. So it's important to talk about all of those things as you're going through that. Books featuring kids' names is cool, right? It's super cool to find your name in a book. Writing activities to promote cognitive development. Have children collect the alphabet letters they know. There are computer alphabet programs. One of my children totally taught herself to read using Starfall on the computer, right? My other child, okay, this is the difference between the first and second child, right? First child, she learned how to read because we read to her all the time. We taught her how to read, blah, 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 whatever. The other one taught herself to read on Starfall. It's also different. Everybody learns to read in different ways. And we talk about that a lot in 217. So it's important to understand how children understand things and how they learn. Alphabet books from your reading center. Go on the Champaign Public Library website. They have a whole list of alphabet books. Alphabet books are great because it gives children a lot of opportunities to understand how letters work. The physical part of writing, small motor development, right? You need to learn how to do that. If you are not a child who can hold a pencil and write yet, maybe you can learn to write with your finger in sand or on salt or with finger paint, right? Using paper punchers is a good way to help children learn to use that grasp. What's that called? Response that you need to write. Writing thank you notes. What a fun thing and what an excellent idea for children to learn how to do, right? Thank you for being my friend at school today. How great would it be for a 4-year-old to come to school and have a thank you note from a friend about, how they played well together or whatever. Greeting cards, you can always find like junky, cheap greeting cards, individual mailboxes, like I talked about. Let children write their names to sign up for a turn. We always had kids write their names when they came into the classroom. One way to do that is very simple and easy and not wasteful is to have either their name cards that they can trace first. And then you can do dot to dots, and then you can just have a space for them to write their name so that they can progress through those stages. Have it laminated or have it in a plastic sleeve so you can change it in and out, and then use a dry erase marker, right? You had to sign in every day. And then interactive writing. That's where you are working all together, writing things a lot of times based on a story or a book that you're reading. Involve children in making printed or scribbled lists, right? Help them write down lists about things. What are some things we need for the classroom? Let's talk about what kind of snacks we might want to have in our classroom. Should we write it down? Right? Involve every child in recording daily happenings. A great thing that you could do is have a whiteboard in your classroom, and at the end of the day, talk about who remembers what we did today. We went outside, and you write it down. That's showing them really clearly the connection between the words that you're saying, the things that you did, and those letters on the whiteboard. Involve children in storytelling and story reading using wordless picture books. Wordless picture books are really fun for older kids because they can make up their own stories. Another fun thing that you can do is just find a bunch of different illustrations and have them make up a story about what's happening in that page, in that picture, and then write it down. Having children dictate to you to write things down is very important so they can see that the words that they say also connect with words on the page. One thing that we always had was journals. And if we did something, or even if we didn't do something, it was journal time. You got out your journal. It's a page that has a blank space at the top and then lined at the bottom. And kids draw a picture, and then they either write down what the picture talks about, or they dictate it to the teacher and sit and watch the teacher write it down, or they write it down and then dictate it to the teacher, and the teacher puts a Post-it note in that says what the children's writing says. Dual language learners can write before mastering spoken language. A lot of times it's easier for children to write cat than it is to talk about cat. And so helping them, merge those two language skills is important. Bilingual books, having those available. Your role is to observe the different developmental levels: manipulation, mastery, or meaning. So in this case, manipulation, can they use a pencil, right? Can they hold it the right way? Mastery, can they write their name? Meaning, can they write other words? Most interactions fall under solitary play or parallel play categories. So when you're doing writing with children, it's going to be either they're doing that on their own or they're doing it next to each other. It's hard for kids to do this together, right? The Writing Center. Track children who use the center and make sure that children who don't prefer to use the center get to go to the center periodically. And that may mean when you're releasing people from large group time to free play, you might direct a child. Ashley, you're going to go to the Writing Center today. I'd like you to work on drawing a picture for me or whatever. Offer direct invitation to the center, like I said. Teachers' presence in the center may bring in the children. If you're in the Writing Center writing lists or notes, right? And then listen to what they're talking about. And if they come up with ideas for how to use the Writing Center, use them, right? Writing is fun with kids, and we don't do it enough. And if you want to know more about it, you should take 217.